Chapter 2. Justin sighed in relief as the last light flicked off. This Maui show had felt so much longer than the others. Was it because exhaustion covered him? Irritation he hadn't gotten to do much sightseeing? Or something more? Could it be that watching all this love and facing his loveless life was wearing thin on him? He relaxed into the approaching darkness. "Justin, I need a word." And the relaxation flew out the window. The tone in Peter's voice sent chills down Justin's back, and he hurriedly searched his memory for any reason Peter might be upset with him. He hadn't sent out any new auditions yet, so the likelihood he knew about those was small. Besides, Peter had to know this wasn't a permanent gig for Justin. Justin had told him that at the beginning, when they'd partnered as producers. True, that had been a decade ago, but still. "Sure, Peter, what's up?" Justin glanced around for something to do to keep from focusing on Peter. He knew from experience that when Peter's voice took on the deep timbre, that nothing good was coming next. The only problem was that there was nothing around. The crew had packed up and vanished, like ghosts, almost as if they knew this discussion would be happening. There was nothing around them but sand. "I want you to take some time off," Peter began. Justin sagged with relief. Time off? He'd planned to take some anyway. Now he had his partner's blessing. Even better. "Of course, Peter, now that the show has wrapped, I wasn't finished." It wasn't quite anger, but there was a definite forcefulness to Peter's voice that shut Justin up and sent the dread coursing through him once again. "It is obvious from your behavior of late that you need some time away from the show." "My behavior?" Justin swallowed the words quickly, afraid his tone would invoke suspicion. Peter shot him one of those, "you know what I'm talking about" stares, the kind that could make you feel guilty even if you had done nothing wrong. But Justin knew he was off his game. He had just hoped no one else had noticed it. "Yes, your behavior. Bringing the reporters to Tyler's and Laney's wedding, hoping to break them up." Justin held up a hand and shook his head. "In my defense, those two were over-the-top sweet. And besides, it didn't work." Peter continued as if Justin hadn't interrupted him. "Setting up all these physical dates to make the women look bad? Carl said he wanted an active woman. It wasn't why Justin had planned the dates he had, but it was a good excuse. And telling Carl it didn't matter who he chose?" Justin cringed at that one. He shouldn't have done that. Technically, he had broken contract, and Peter could fire him for that. "That was a mistake. But if you had heard him and his indecision..." Peter rolled his eyes, and the volume of his voice rose in exasperation. "He was undecided because he was making a huge decision. Our goal is to find these men and women love, remember?" Justin remembered. He just couldn't seem to make himself care. When they'd started this show, he had been young and in love, but then tragedy had struck and love had turned its back on him. Now the idea of a happily ever after left him feeling empty and jaded. Peter took a deep breath, composing himself. His next words came out softer. "So, I think you need to get your head on straight. Take some time and remember why we are doing this job." "Fine, I'll take some time. I'll go visit my sister or something." His sister lived in Washington State with her husband, 2.5 kids, and the perfect job. So the thought of visiting her held little appeal, but at least it would get Peter off his back. "No, I've already booked the place you're going. I'm sending you to the Slice of Tranquility." The what? Even the name sounded awful to Justin. He didn't need tranquility. Well, maybe he did, but he didn't need to go to a place named that. It would probably be adorned with fuzzy bathrobes and yoga meetings and green smoothies made with algae instead of coffee. The Slice of Tranquility. That's what Margie called it anyway. It's the cabin where I met my wife. "You met your wife at a cabin?" Justin was thoroughly confused. Was he supposed to be at this cabin to relax or find love? Peter waved a hand. "It's a long story. Anyway, I've booked it for you. It's right on the ocean. You can relax." His eyes wandered to Justin's hair. "Let your hair down a little and come back refreshed." "In case you haven't noticed, Peter, we're at the beach." He gestured widely at the surrounding sand. We've been in Hawaii for the last few months. Yes, but you've been working, not relaxing. Besides, magical things happen at this cabin. The corners of Peter's lips twitched and his eyes took on a faraway look, as if he was remembering some magical thing that had taken place. Fine. Justin didn't think a cabin at the beach would solve his problems, but he definitely wanted to wipe that expression off Peter's face. Besides, he could use some time away to figure out if he wanted to stay with the show or pursue other options full-time. Just give me the information. Ava pulled into the Reflections rental office and turned off the car. Even this building exuded a sense of peace and tranquility. Nestled into a grove of trees, it blended in with the white sand around it. No other cars sat around the building, and Ava wondered where the employees parked. The quiet pressed in on her as she approached the building. There was no traffic, no hum of conversation, not even the chirping of birds. It was as if time stood still here, in its own little bubble. A tiny bell jingled as she pushed open the door. The sound reminded Ava of the fairy wings effect in a show she used to love as a child. Every time a fairy received wings or used them in some magical way, there would be this tinkling sound. Ava remembered nothing else from the show, not the name of it or the storylines, but that sound somehow imprinted on her mind. The door shut softly behind her, and a soft, warm scent of vanilla floated through the air, adding to the homey feel. Once again, Ava felt transported back to her grandmother's house, where it always smelled of cookies and love. A woman with hair that resembled fluffy white marshmallows emerged from the lone desk as Ava entered. "Oh, hello, dear. You must be Ava. I'm Margie." Her smile lit up the room, and her warm demeanor put Ava immediately at ease. Though impeded by her age and a slight limp in her right leg, Margie ambled toward Ava, her weathered hand outstretched. Ava felt as if she were in a dream. Margie reminded her of someone, and not just that grandmother feel, but there was something more. "I am." Ava shook the hand, not realizing she had lifted her own. Margie's other hand closed over their clasped hands, and Ava felt frozen, as if glue held her feet in place. Warmth flooded her along with a feeling of safety, but that was silly. She didn't even know this woman. "I just know you will have a fantastic time. Let me get you the keys." She dropped their hands and Ava blinked. The warmth receded from her body, though it still circled through the room, just out of touch. She followed Margie back to the desk where a stack of papers sat prominently in the middle. Margie rifled through the papers, shaking her head and emitting soft murmurs as she turned the pages. "Ah, here we go. I just need you to sign here." She handed the paper and a pen to Ava. Ava scanned the contract, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She was responsible for her own meals and her laundry, but she knew that going in. The cottage also needed to be in the same condition when she left. Again, understandable. Only one clause seemed odd. If perhaps the cottage was double booked, she agreed to give it 3 days before asking for a refund. "Does this happen often?" she asked, pointing at the odd clause. Margie looked down and then waved her hand. "Oh, hardly ever. But it did happen one time, and it makes more sense to have the information there. You know what I mean?" "Right. So does this mean, if it gets double booked, that I have to stay there with someone else for 3 days to qualify for the refund?" Margie's white hair bounced with her nod. "It does, but again, it hardly ever happens. I'm sure you have nothing to worry about." Ava nodded, but in the back of her mind, she thought it would be just her luck if it happened to her, especially when she really needed the quiet. Still, she was here, and it was paid for. She signed her name to the bottom and handed the contract back. "Wonderful. Here's the key and a map to get there. It's a little off the beaten path, so make sure you watch for the signs." The words triggered something in Ava's head. A memory? A feeling? She wasn't sure. "What did you say?" "I said watch for the signs, dearie." She placed the key and map in Ava's hand. "They're there to guide you." "Right. Thank you." Those seemed odd words for Margie to say, but the woman was older. Maybe it was her way. The map proved a little challenging to follow. and twice Ava almost missed the turn. Only the small wooden signs that read simply "Tranquility" with an arrow saved her. But the view was worth the challenge when she arrived. The ocean spread, a blue blanket for as far as she could see. Was this a private beach? Warm, salty air caressed her skin as she stepped out of the car. A light breeze ruffled her dark hair, and the sun rained soft kisses on her face. This she could get used to. Fear and worry rolled off her shoulders as she stepped into the cabin, which was larger than it had looked in the picture. The immediate room welcomed her with a charming fireplace and large plush furniture. Her favorite was a cushy chair in the corner by the window. A lamp nestled behind it as if protecting it with its glow, and the chair faced the window, which looked out at the expansive ocean. It would be the perfect place for her to work. She could almost feel the creative energy flowing through her as she pictured sitting there. A hallway led out of the room and opened to the kitchen, patterned with cottages and beach prints. It wasn't large, and the only seating was a small table with 2 chairs. But Ava didn't figure she would spend much time in here anyway. Long enough to prepare the food, but she'd much rather eat it facing the window, or better yet outside. A sliding glass door lay behind the table, and it led right out to the beach. Ava could see a small table and 2 chairs outside. Perhaps that was where she would eat. She checked the cupboards, but they were empty, as was the refrigerator. No matter. Ava had brought food with her. Beyond the kitchen were 2 bedrooms, each about the same size and color palette. They both contained a private bathroom, which seemed a little odd in a 2-bedroom, but Ava certainly didn't mind. She disliked hotels that had no bathroom in the room and forced her to walk down the hall, often in the dark, early morning hours. She deposited her suitcase on the bed on one of the rooms, the one with the view of the hammock, as the other just had a view of the beach, but no ocean, and then returned to the car for the cooler of food she had brought. It should be enough to last her a week, and then she figured she would either be finished with her book or she could take a break and drive to the nearest town for more. With the food unpacked and put away, Ava grabbed her notebook and headed outside. She couldn't wait to feel the sand between her toes and soak up the inspiration from the waves. Surely here she would find inspiration. How could she not?